it's great to be back. We've got another edition of Percussion Discussion, and really thrilled to have legendary UK drummer Mr. Geoff Dugmore with us. So thanks for doing this, Geoff. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Well, glad to have you. So, as always, I tend to start these at the obvious place. Where did drums all begin for yourself?
Well, my mother told me when I was about 3, I used to get her knitting needles and biscuit tins, and I used to start hitting the biscuit tins all the time when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And then she told me about maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, I was talking about it with her, and she said, "Oh yeah, you used to get paper bags and put them over the cushions for cymbals." So I suppose one could say I was showing early signs of creativity.
Definitely.
But it kind of started from there, and then when I think I must have been about 11 or something like that, and I saw my sister had bought the Let It Be album by the Beatles, and it was a gatefold sleeve, if my memory serves me correctly, and inside it there was a picture of the studio and Ringo's drums, and that really just was like, oh my God, I got to do this. This is everything. And my parents would let me have a drum set, but I had an electric guitar. So I taught myself to play some electric guitar, but I still really, really, really desperately wanted to play drums. And I managed to swap my guitar stuff with another guy at school who did have a drum set. And it was an old Premier set with calfskin heads.
Wow, yeah.
And so I swapped that and brought it home. And I used to be in my bedroom from the moment I got back from school, and I had a couple of speakers behind me like this, and just play along to all my favorite songs of the time. And there was one in particular, I was thinking about this recently, there was one in particular called Frankenstein by the Edgar Winter Group.
Okay.
And there was it was an instrumental, all based on Edgar's kind of synthy keyboard stuff, but there was a drum break in the middle which was just phenomenal. I used to love to play that along to the record. But everything that was going on at the time, and then I made my first demos when I was 12,
right,
and in a little gospel 4-track recording studio in the middle of Glasgow. I mean, how that came about, I'm not quite sure, but it did. And I was so thrilled about it, sent it off to all the record labels with these cute little letters, we've got a Marshall 4x12 and a Premier drum set and all this kind of stuff. Just waiting for them, all flooding back saying, "Brilliant, let's sign you," and absolutely nothing. Well, we did get a lot of very kind letters back saying thank you, but it's not for us at the moment, And then it kind of got into writing songs. And then when I was 16, I got my first deal with Phonogram, which was a real kind of pop thing. And, it was seriously manufactured pop. And luckily it didn't do anything, but it did give me a sort of insight fairly early on, workings of it all. And then we were back up in Scotland, and we were writing a lot of stuff. I moved to London when I was 17, I think. I left school after what we called our O-levels. Mm-hmm. That would be GCSEs. Yeah. And moved to London with the guys I'd been playing with since I was 11, 12 years of age. And we rented this. The first place we rented actually was quite a bizarre place. It was about 3 doors along from Donald Nielsen in Wilston, the guy that mass murdered all these people in these cars. And then we moved to this 2-bedroom flat above a butcher's shop in Neasden, and there was 8 of us living in it. And it was fantastic because we had absolutely nothing but a sack full of dreams, And we started to get some shows, play some gigs and stuff. And the bass player and I decided because we'd had some very heavyweight management behind us for a while. And they were managing the Eurythmics and Yes at the time and various other bands. Yeah. And they couldn't get us arrested, basically, with a record label. So the bass player and I took up on it ourselves to go and visit some A&R guys. So we strolled into A&M, managed to get a meeting there, strolled into A&M on a Friday evening, played the A&R guy our stuff, and he offered us a deal there and then. That was it, bosh.
Wow, that's pretty unheard of these days.
Well, completely unheard of these
Yeah.
days. But luckily, he was a very kind of eccentric American guy who kind of got what we were. I suppose, we were kind of like an art rock band in ways. And so, of course, that opens a sort of floodgate, because once one label is interested in you, the word gets around, and then everybody suddenly comes out of the woodwork who hadn't been interested in it all beforehand. But we decided to go with A&M, and A&M at the time was such a cool label. They had the Police and Joan Armatrading and all these amazing acts. And so we made our first album, and we did 3 in total.
So this is the Europeans you're talking about? Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, well, the guy that was the keyboard player, he's now the singer in Marillion.
Steve Hogarth.
Steve Hogarth, yeah.
Okay, right.
So it's we did 3 albums, and we had our first single, which was sort of chasing up the charts in the States, and we went over there, and we kind of blew that for 1 or 2 reasons that only our manager could probably tell you at the time. And but we became one of these acts that could sell out sort of 2,000 or 3,000 capacity venues, but we could never really translate it into sales, into record sales. So that was that, and then that kind of split up, kind of rather in not good terms, shall we say? Although it's all water under the bridge now.
Before you leave this particular chapter, there's a song, "Burning Inside You." Is it?
Yeah.
Such a lovely groove to open up the song, and there's I was watching on YouTube last week some footage, and it's lovely. It reminds me of it's Steve Jordan-esque.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I remember doing that very well. We were doing it at Rockfield Studios.
Okay.
And I was recording the drums in a room behind the control room. Obviously there was a wall, and it was behind the control room. And it came up. I'm not quite sure how the song came about, but that we were looking for some way to open the song that wasn't just. And I was just sort of playing, and the other guy said, "That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it." And it was actually a Sonar snare drum. With the snares off.
Okay. Timbali-ish, yeah.
Yeah. And because later in the song, the snare drum comes in, and that was a wooden Rogers that I used for that particular section. But of course, back in those days, there was a lot of stuff at that time that was, it was almost unusual to play the whole set in one go.
Yeah, yeah.
At that time, everybody was into this whole thing. Well, let's record the bass drum first, and then we'll record the snare drum, and then we'll record the hi-hat. But you got to make sure that you leave the space for where you're going to play a drum fill, and all this kind of stuff.
It must be hard to get the feel right when you have to do that. Because it's not.
I've never really sort of thought about these things. The only thing I ever think about when I'm playing is I put my mind into what the song is. If the song, that particular song was, it was a very personal, sort of quite heartbreaking song involving obviously a member of the opposite sex. And, you put that mental turmoil that you were going through at the time, you just express it through your playing. And I've kind of always taken that through with me my entire playing career.
Yeah.
If you have a song, whether it's upbeat, downbeat, sad, happy, whatever, I just kind of try to put my mind in a place that recalls those kind of emotions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that I'm thinking of that when I'm playing, but I'm listening to the lyric as well, but I'm sort of, it's just all part of the process. So, I've never been one to sort of overanalyze anything. It's kind of it's always just comes purely from the heart and from the soul, Yeah. You play things and because I've never had a drum lesson in my life. I'm completely self-taught. Having said that, I did play in a pipe band at school. I played snare drum, so I was aware of rudiments, if you like.
That's a good grounding, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very good grounding. But in terms of having a drum set lesson, I should really do that at some point. intrigued to know where, you know, what I'm doing wrong, because I'm sure I'm doing plenty.
You've done it wrong with enough people over the years, put it that way. So I wouldn't worry too much, Geoff. So obviously, when the Europeans ended, did you? Because obviously, you were a member of the band. You weren't a sideman. It was
No. I mean, I wrote all the music in that band.
yeah.
Sorry, like 99% of it. I wrote that. So I came from a sort of songwriting background as well as a playing background. I think that's a good thing, you know, also to have that, to be able to understand how a song it works, you know, how the composition. And I think also, having come from a band, you have that very much that sort of team spirit mentality.
Yeah.
You're not just working solely for yourself all the way through your career kind of thing. So when you go in to play with other acts, you understand the dynamics of how these things work, and how to create the good chemistry with everybody, and make everything feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. So where did you go from there? I mean, was it a natural progression to be the session, you know, touring and recording drummer you are today?
You know, to me back then, I thought a session player was somebody that played in the West End. I had a concept that really that session guys played on other people's records. You know, that my concept of session was a guy that played in the pit in the West End or something like that. Yeah. So what kind of happened was you're probably familiar with Joan Armatrading.
Yes.
So she was on A&M as well, and she had been a big fan of my playing, which I didn't know at the time. But she called me shortly after the band split up and said, "Oh, I'm making a new album. Will you come and play?" And I was like, "Yeah, wow, okay, cool, yeah. How does this work?" You know, I had no idea how you did this kind of thing.
Yeah. So
we went to her studio. She lives down in well, I won't say exactly where she lives, but she lives down in Surrey. Yeah. And it was myself, her, Pino, and a keyboard player called Alex White, I think it was. And we just started work, and it all was very natural and all very cool. And she was a real genius in many ways, because she saw the finished painting and all the colors that would go around how to do it. And in a way, I suppose that taught me quite a lot from being the sort of sideman, if you like, how this was all going to work. And because it's a never-ending learning curve anyway, you're always. And it was just a fantastic experience to suddenly play on somebody else's record, but for them to appreciate what you do, and for them wanting you to bring your thing to their party. And of course, at first I was a little bit nervous. I wasn't quite sure what exactly the person might want, because you're so used to playing in your own little bubble. Mm-hmm. So that, you know, it was just, she was really generous and kind, and she knew it was the first time I'd been playing with somebody else. So she was just, you know, she was very encouraging, and made everything so easy. And I actually even sang a duet with her on that particular album. Wow. And it was just a really glorious experience to kickstart where I was going to end up, you know.
And not a bad bass player to do your first album outside of your own band with.
Fantastic. And I went on to do another one with Pino, or quite a few, but we did a solo album for Tony Banks of Genesis. Wow. At the Genesis studio, again in Surrey. And yeah, we've worked quite a few times over the years. He's a real sweetheart, an absolute gem, and one of the nicest guys you could meet. I don't think I've ever met a musician who is not a really cool, kind-hearted person, especially in the drumming community. I mean, the drumming community is something which is completely unique amongst musicians. You know, it's such a support network. Yeah. I can't imagine guitar. Well, I was spoken to about it to guitar players and bass players, and sort of they said, yeah, but we just don't have that same kind of camaraderie that you guys have, you know. So it's really completely unique and very inspiring for everybody.
You know, it's one of those things, you leave the egos at the door and get on with it, I think.
Absolutely. There is no place for that in our business, that's for sure.
No.
Although there's plenty around, but not from our side of the fence, I don't think.
No. Well, the first time I witnessed you play live was with Jimmy Nail on the Crocodile Shoes tour.
Yeah, that was a pretty little band as well.
It was. Did you do
Andy,
the album as well?
Yeah, I did. I think I did about 4 or 5 albums for Jimmy.
Yeah.
Over the years, and I did that tour, and then I did one more. Then I couldn't do some, and then I think I did something towards the end. But I still speak to him from time to time.
Yeah.
But that first tour was really quite. It was really good because the band was so great.
It was.
Tessa Niles and Chester Kamen, Andy Kane. Some great players on that, and it was a lot of fun.
When you say Tessa Niles, what a beautiful voice, just incredible.
I mean, and one of the funniest, kindest people you could ever hope to meet. I can't think more highly of Tessa. She's such a great person.
Well, that obviously that tour was hot on the heels of the I mean, some of the younger viewers might go, well, what's Crocodile Shoes? But it obviously had a TV show, and it was, the appeal was huge, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's you never know where these things are going to come from, you know. And Jimmy, to his credit, made the most of it, and you know, he has a very unique and special voice, and he wrote some great songs for it with Paddy McAloon from Prefab Sprout, if anybody remembers them. But I remember one of the most crazy things about that was finishing that tour and going straight to the studio to start work on a Killing Joke album. That's what I love about what I do. You know, I love that contrast. It's fantastic where you go from one complete thing like this, and then you just throw the whole thing out of the door and go and do something completely different. Wipe
the board clean and start again.
Absolutely. But that's, you know, it's fantastic. If you kind of get in a rut where you're only doing the same thing all the time, it gets a bit boring.
But there was one track in particular on that album, I think it was the opening track, and it was Calling Out Your Name, which is with like drop tuning on the Telecaster.
Yeah.
Oh. And
it was a really great song to play that. It was a lot of fun.
Do you know, I've actually played that. When we were youngsters in a band, we used to open up with that number. And a lot of people would go, because it wasn't a single. And and they'd assume it was our song. And we didn't always let it.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we won so many Battle of the Bands and different competitions and things with that song. So
wow, that is so cool.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah. I'm going to send him an email when we're finished here and let him know.
There's no royalties or anything, I'm afraid, but it was, and we used to do it with the harmonies, and we used to love doing it, and it was, everyone was, oh, that's a great
thing about that song was it kind of in a way reminded me of Tom Petty in some ways.
Yeah, very.
It had that just really straight down the line, lovely, joyous groove for everybody else just to glide across the top. And
it's beautiful.
All day, and just with a huge smile on my face, I'd be very happy.
You must have enjoyed, I mean, that must have been a joyous experience from start to finish, because there was a Crocodile Shoes 2 as well, wasn't there? And
yeah, and I think on the Crocodile Shoes 2, he did this wonderful cover of a Beach Boys song, and I can't think what the name of it is now, but he really just, it was a peach of a version of it, really beautiful.
The way he puts his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he, when he sings?
Completely. But then I think, you know, most artists do, you know, you have to. I mean, I admire singers because I admire them so much because, I mean, really, you're letting the world know every emotion that you've been feeling. And then you've got to kind of stand in front of, whether it's 5 people or 50,000 people, and deliver it. I mean, that's a hell of a job to do, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I
No.
mean, I'll qualify that by saying there's a Japanese artist that I've worked with for many, many years called Ikichi Yazawa. And I've been touring with him for years and years and years, probably about 30 years or something like that. But we always finish with 10 nights at the Budokan in Tokyo.
He is massive then.
He is massive, I tell you. And there was one night, I think it was one of the last shows, the run at the Tokyo. And he invited me to come from behind the drums down to the front of the stage. And I have never shit myself as much as that. And I said to him, you know, we were talking with the audience and everything. And I said to him, I'm terrified here. This is way out of my comfort zone down here, you know.
You come from behind the wall of drums and cymbals.
Yeah, I'm very safe up on my riser, and it's sort of I can see what's going on, look after everything, make sure it's all going correctly. But put me down there, whoa, that's a big step.
Oh, you know, but for all the live stuff you've done, you've got an incredible CV of recordings as well. And do you have a favorite? Would you rather, or are you happy doing a bit of both, live and recording stuff?
I love doing both for different reasons. I love recording because you can get right into the sort of creative heartland of the song and what you're doing, and you can, you know, you can put your ideas into the mix and everything. But then I love playing live because I love the buzz of that. I love the interaction with the other musicians and the audience, and you know, you give out, they give back, and so you get this perpetual sort of build up of fun going on. So I mean, I like them both for different reasons. And you know, let's be honest about it. When I started, I mean, there was so much session work going on, and tons and tons. You just went from project to project to project to project, week after week after week. And of course, you know, you would spend a month perhaps doing 14 backing tracks. Now you do 31 backing tracks in 3 days.
Right.
You know what I mean? It kind of, it's full circle. And you know, a lot of players, a lot of what we'd call studio players, had to start doing more live stuff because that's how you were going to make your living, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a little bit of a sort of gentle nudge in that direction because we kind of had to a certain degree. And I wouldn't want to only do one or the other. That would be, I just couldn't do that. You know, I need the buzz of both. And lately I've been getting more into production as well, and all that kind of stuff, which I love that whole, you know, you work with so many amazing producers over the years. You learn so much from them. And I love the whole psyche of working with a young band or a young singer and, you know, taking their embryonic song and molding it into the finished product. I mean, that's it's brilliant. You know, what more could anybody ask to do in life?
You know, there seems to be more than a fair share of drummers who've gone into the production side. I mean, Ted Templeman being one, for example. You know,
Brother Michael Walden.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few that I've read interviews and different things, and it seems to be a natural step for quite a lot.
Well, I think, you know, you if you think about what the drummer's role is in the band, he's up there, he's sort of overseeing everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. If something goes awry somewhere, it's always the drummer who has to sort of go, right, okay, we're going to go to this section, 1, 2, 3, 4, bosh, and pull everybody back in line. Yeah. And so in a way, it's a kind of natural thing because you're seeing the overview of everything. Mm. So it's natural that you see the overview of a song, you know, the natural progression to go into that and to want to nurture that side of your ability and also to put, you know, over the years you gain so much experience in so many different ways. You can't always just say it's this and it's this and it's this. It's just a subconscious that's gone into the grey matter over the years. And if you can impart that and share it, fantastic. Why wouldn't you? You know, you'd be crazy not to want to do that.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite producer you've worked with over the? Do you work with guys regularly? And
Bob Claremont is always a joy to
yeah,
work with. I've worked with Bob on several occasions, and you know, the great thing about him is it's just so easy. You know, he never sort of tells you what to do. He just puts some mics around your drums, and off you go, and that's it. You know.
yeah.
Um, he once said to me, you know, what I love about you is the fact that every time you play, it's kind of like this could be the last time you're going to play. He said, I thought that was a really sweet and very, very kind thing to say, because he was intimating that my passion towards it was so great that,
You
know,
mean it?
absolutely. The thing about this business is you can't bluff.
No.
You might be able to do it for a little while, but very quickly somebody will see through it, and then it's game over, you know. So I've always treated every session as if it was the first. I've treated every gig as if it was the first. And, you know, if I ever stop having that kind of feeling towards it, then I would say to myself, okay, well, maybe it's time to stop or something like that, or, you know, take a break or whatever it is, and come back to it. And there's plenty of people have done that over the years. You know, I've spoken to quite a few well-known players who've taken like a year out or whatever and come back and felt re-inspired by it all and everything.
Yeah.
And I did that myself to a certain degree around, you know, the sort of early 90s or so. I had just finished doing Stevie Nicks, the singer from Fleetwood Mac, and a friend of mine had just finished doing Madonna. And we were sitting having a cup of coffee one morning and sort of saying, oh, you know, we seem to be on this kind of treadmill, but have we forgotten the reasons why we got into music in the first place? So within about 2 or 3 days, we both sold everything we had, cars, flats, the lot. And we rented a bedsit in Notting Hill and just sat there writing songs for 18 months and just getting really back in touch with all the roots and the reasons why we loved music in the first place.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's a really cathartic thing to do, because as I say, we did both feel like we were on this kind of treadmill of I mean, loving it and everything. All that, don't get me wrong, but it was just like, hang on a minute, we need to shake things up and get back to the square one and rekindle all of that stuff again, you know. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We had a fantastic time. It was so liberating in many ways, you know.
Yeah. And how do you feel about touring? Is it something you still love doing? I'm not talking about the on stage, you know, because you're on stage for 2 hours and hanging around for 22. That's the general rule of thumb, isn't it?
Exactly. But I mean, I still love it. For me nowadays, the joyous challenge is to try and experience it in cultures that I haven't been to before.
Yeah.
So, for example, last year I spent most of the year touring with China's biggest rock star.
Okay. Called
Zhu Wei. Now, if I tell you, the first place we played was the Bird's Nest Olympic Stadium.
Oh, right.
So that gives you an idea of where this guy is.
Yeah.
And I had gone to China about 5 years previous, and I wasn't sure about it. I couldn't quite get my head around it. And so he invited me again to come because the 5 years previously, John Blackwell, who sat aside, was drummer. He had been doing some shows with this guy. But interestingly, the Chinese really love British music. They've kind of all grown up on British music much more than American music, which is the antithesis of Japan, for example, who really embraced the Americans' music far more than the British music. Yeah. So to have that experience of playing in a country I'd never played in before with music, I was the only Westerner. Everybody else, all the other guys in the band were Chinese. to me, that's a great experience to for the musical culture, the culture of the country, and all that kind of stuff. So in many ways, that's more exciting than just going to do AN other session in London sort of thing now. Yeah, you know, it's just, touring is fantastic as long as it's at the right level. I don't know if I can go back to a transit van again, to be honest with you. I think I've done my fair share. I mean, the first band I had when I was talking about back when I was 16 or 17, we used to do 4 or 5 shows a week, but we had this old van that would stick in fourth gear. So we'd be, you know, the Highlands of Scotland in freezing snow trying to push this bloody van up a hill to get to a gig. I'm not quite sure I'm ready for that again.
No. Out of curiosity, Geoff, how do you land a gig with one of China's biggest stars as the only Westerner? I mean, how do your paths cross, if you see what I'm saying?
Well, he was a big fan of Richard Ashcroft, who I had worked with, and he also had heard some other records that I had done, and then it came. He was aware of me, from what I'm told, and then his management were talking to somebody from Play It Again Sam Records, which we'd call Pius.
Yes.
And a friend of mine who works there just happened to sort of mention my name and they said, "Oh yes, we know this guy. We know. Can you put us in touch with each other?" And so that's how it all came about. You know,
I mean,
the wondrous thing about the music business is, as we know, connections mean a lot, and word of mouth means a lot. So that's how that particular one came about.
That's great.
It came about through another friend of mine who was a programmer, and I went on to work. I've been working with him for whatever 30 years now or something. But yeah, that's how that one came about.
It's a huge compliment, though, isn't it? You know, they could obviously, a star of that ilk could have, I guess, anybody he wanted. The fact that he's come to you is a nice compliment.
Absolutely, and you know, it was the same because I worked for a long time with a huge French singer called Johnny Hallyday.
Yes. And
you know, he had Jimi Hendrix was in his band before, and Johnny recorded Hey Joe before Jimmy did.
Wow.
And Johnny recorded it before Jimmy, but Jimmy Page had been in his band, Abe Laboriel Jr. had been in his band, Kurt Mascara, Wilfredo Reyes Jr. I mean, the list of musicians that have been in his band is, you know, 5-star plus, you know. Yeah. So I had done about 2 or 3 albums for him before I even went on tour with him. But touring with him was, I mean, that really was the ultimate touring family. It was just amazing on every level.
Yeah.
Just so great. And I miss those days greatly now that he's gone, unfortunately.
Well, I tell you, I mean, I'm looking at the list. I don't generally write notes. I've just got things written down. I mean, recording wise, Tina Turner's on the list. I mean, was it I Don't Want to Lose You played on?
Yeah. There's a lot of sort of dispute as to whose version of Simply the Best is actually on the record.
Oh.
I know that I recorded it, but whether it's mine, I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't tell you, because we did these 2 tracks in the same sessions. But I know that for sure 100%, because I heard that Mel Gaynor had tried it as well.
Okay.
And then I heard it with another guy called Art Wood. Some American guy had done it. So I you know, I've never been 100% sure. And as far as I'm aware, that these 2 tracks were the last 2 tracks to go on the album, and the artwork had already been done for the album. So I think that the credits aren't 100% correct on the whole album sleeve, but I don't know for sure. And I'm not going to go into a can of worms on that one, if you know it. But no, she was fantastic to work with. I mean, just brilliant. She came breezing into the studio with this little tartan miniskirt on, stuck her leg up on the table and said, "Fill my thighs, honey." And, so what do I do here, you know? And so I did, and she said, "Great, you can stay." That was that.
Yeah, some legs as well. Don't want to get into that detail, but yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's, you know, so
A million strange, weird, and wonderful stories to be told, which will all be in my book one day.
yeah, you know, but people, it's one thing getting into the drums and what was this drum, but this is far more, I think it's far more interesting to hear just little snippets of, you know, different things.
You know, I mean, at the end of the day, a drum set is a drum set.
Yeah.
You know, it could be any make or shape or size, you know, and I believe that, you know, 99% of drummers will be able to get some kind of sound out of it and make it work. I mean, over the years, you create to a certain degree, your own sound, and you know, rightly so, and your own style and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're just there to serve the song and to serve the artist as a session. And that's our job, you know, and it's, you know, I look at a lot of the music colleges and stuff, and I feel very strongly about this because I find it a bit annoying that they spend so much time on this kind of theory and education, which is great. You need to know that stuff. But at no point do they actually tell you about sort of man management or personality skills in terms of getting on with other musicians. And, you know, what are you going to do when you finish this course? You know, you think you're just going to walk into the next whatever Coldplay or whatever it is, you know, you need to be armed with all of that kind of information just as much as the playing information.
So they kind of give you the bullets, but don't tell you how to fire the gun.
You know, and I do feel strongly that they need to address that particular issue within these, you know, I was talking to a young guitar player who had went to Berkeley, and he left after 1 year for the very that I just talked about. He said, you know, yeah, okay, well, you can teach us all this stuff, but what I want to know is the other stuff, you know. And I thought that was very, you know, I said to the guy, I said, wow, you believe in this, you know, that you weren't going to waste any more time and money, you know, carrying on doing something that he didn't feel he was going to get enough out of at the time.
Thing is, can you be taught this thing? You know,
I
to
think,
behave, how to.
Well, I think you can be given the guidelines.
Yeah.
I think you can be, you know, what's wrong with talking and simulating an audition scenario? And maybe they do that, I don't know. But I mean, that's just one example of things that I think, you know, I do feel that all those issues need to be addressed within the education scene, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, another thing, you can come out of these. I mean, I heard an interview with somebody, I forget who it was, and he had a year and a half at Berkeley and come out of it with a $90,000 loan. And he said, look, you need to, never mind trying to get gigs. He says, you need to get a part-time job to pay off this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not slagging off the thing. I'm just saying, you know, you've got to increase the actual sort of curriculum within the courses to take on board these kind of aspects of it. Otherwise, you know, you're just going to have whatever 2,000 or 3,000 kids that are all playing identical to each other and not really knowing how to engage with other musicians and how to interact, you know, and that's vital. Without that, you're not going to get great music without interaction, you know.
I mean, it's getting harder now anyway. I mean, COVID hasn't helped, but even...
Absolutely, I agree. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's you know, we all do some things from home and all this kind of thing, but you can't replace the interaction. You know, I don't think any one of us could put their hand on their heart and say, hey, I signed up to be in music to sit here on my own. None of us did that. You know, we're victims of circumstance, I agree, but we need to, you know, try to find some way that we can get back to actually playing together and making something as a unit and playing off each other. I fear we might go through a little period where a lot of the music that's being made could be very kind of sterile because everybody's played it in a different place, and it'll be very much kind of a very one-dimensional type of song where because you're not getting the interaction. It's going to be, well, this is the part, that's the part, that's the part, that's the part. And I really hope we don't sort of dig further down into that kind of scenario.
Everything to click, nothing moving.
That's been good for a long time, but it's how you work with it is the question.
Yeah. Do you know, you've worked with some really, what's the best way of describing them? Unique sounding voices that you instantly recognize. And Paul Rodgers being one.
Yeah.
How was that? Because for me, he's one of the, when it comes to voices in rock and blues, he's the man.
It was brilliant. The late, great Jimmy Copley had been doing it, and then I jumped in during the Louisiana Blues album period. And, you know, when I was growing up as a kid, you would, one of the stock songs you played was Can't Get Enough by Bad Company. And then you would do All Right Now by Free with one of the most iconic drum fills of all time in it. Simon Kirke, brilliant, absolute genius. And he was just, it was great. There I was playing with somebody that I just was amazed by when I was a kid, it was just phenomenal. He's great. I mean, what a voice. My God, what a voice. And Roger Chapman from Family was another one.
Oh, right. Okay.
I did a solo album with him, and I mean, he's got such an iconic voice as well. It was just great. You get to play all those great songs, and I don't know, there's something about the way that Paul, where he kind of places the vocal in the song. It's always just that kind of little bit kind of lazy and a bit swaggery, and that in turn sort of induces your playing to get more swaggery and a bit more lazy in a good way, It's quite amazing how that the effect singers can have on that,
Absolutely. I mean, I've also got on the list the late great Robert Palmer as well.
Oh wow, yeah,
instantly recognizable.
Oh yeah, I mean, what an iconic voice. I was working with him during the Addicted to Love period, and he's, for a man of his reputation, he really was he knew all about time and tempo. I mean, there was no question if you were like a BPM too fast for him, it was like nope. And he was just a genius, an absolute joy to work with. We had some great times, great times. Yeah, great. I'd forgotten about that, actually. Glad you remember.
I'm here anytime. And of course, Debbie Harry.
My Debbie, yes.
So you, at this point, were you situated in the States at this point, Geoff?
No, I tell you how the Debbie Harry thing came around. I had done the first major tour I ever did was with a band called the Thompson Twins.
Of course, yeah.
And then when that tour finished, it was maybe about 4 years later or 5 years later, Tom Bailey, the singer, called me up and said, "Hey Geoff, can you? I've written this song with Debbie Harry. Will you come and play some drums on it?" I said, "Yeah, of course. I'd love to. Wow, what an honor! What?" So I went and did this song. It was called "I Want That Man," I think it was called, and that was a big hit for her.
Remember?
And then she wanted to tour in Europe. And she called me up and said, "Hey, can you put a band together? Because Chris and I want to come over, but we don't want to bring out, everybody from the States. So can you put a band together and sort of MD it and make it all happen, and we'll just come." So I did that. And at the end of that, she said to me, "Look, I need to make a new record. Will you come to New York and produce it?" And I was like, "Wow, okay, fine." So I went there. And I went there for 2 or 3 months and stayed for 2 years, just short. And we did, we did the album Electric Ladyland. I mean, another iconic studio. You're working in the studio that Jimi Hendrix worked in, for God's sake, and so many other amazing artists. And we just had such great time. I mean, Debbie and Chris are just beautiful, wonderful people. And they, we did this duet with Joey Ramone.
Oh, brilliant.
Who came in and said, I mean, this guy's huge. Or what should I say? And he was so nice. You sometimes you have a picture in your mind of how somebody's going to be. And I was completely blown away with just how kind of cool and nice he was. And at that time, there was a great scene in New York. I've been hanging out with Sterling and a guy called Robbie Rosa Draco, who then went on to write all the big hits for Livin' La Vida Loca and all this.
Yeah.
And I did a solo album with Robbie and Brian Ray from Paul McCartney's band. Carla Azar was on percussion. And then there was one night, we the guy that ran CBGB's, I was down there with Debbie and just with Debbie. And he said, oh, it's my birthday coming up soon. Will you put something together? So Debbie said, okay, I'll put something together. So we had Debbie, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, Anthony from the Chili Peppers, and then we finished off with this 45-minute version of Groove Is in the Heart by D-Light. And there's all these people on the stage, and you're just thinking, oh man, this just ain't happening. This is too mind-blowing for words, this,
Is this actually in CBGB, or was this after?
Yeah.
Wow.
This CBGB's, everybody just came and had a party, basically. It was a closed night. It wasn't open for the public.
Yeah.
But it was a closed night. But I mean, crazy things happened in New York in those days, because another time I was at Right Track in 48th Street, I think it was, with Carlos Alomar and Carmine Rojas from Bowie's band. We were making, and the late, great Jimmy Malin, percussion. Oh, man, he was unbelievable. This guy was just like a god, But we went to this place called the China Club, which was uptown or downtown from there. I can't remember. Anyway, we're there having a drink, and Stevie Wonder comes in. And with his then girlfriend, anyway, he said to Carlos, I think, he said, oh, I want to play Happy Birthday for my girlfriend. So the next thing I know, I'm on the stage playing with Stevie Wonder, playing Happy Birthday. And I'm thinking, this is a little guy from Glasgow. How the hell did I end up here doing this? But, all these experiences are just so amazing. And so, just, you can't get it in any other business. Things like that to happen. And, you just happen to be in the right place at the right time on the right hour on that particular day, and it's just been one joy from the beginning, and it's just, I think myself one of the luckiest people on earth, and still pinch myself every day able to do it,
I'm just thinking back to 45 minutes ago when you told me about the letter you wrote off to different record companies, and who'd have,
exactly. But I mean, I think it's down to having drive, to having passion, to just being honest. I think I do believe if you're just that kind of decent, honest person who really tries their hardest, you can achieve. It's just you kind of got to want it, but not be desperate about it at the same time. I've always said in the music business, there's a thin line between enthusiasm and desperation.
Yeah, I can believe that.
One is not particularly attractive, and one is very attractive, shall we say?
Absolutely. I mean, you've had an incredible career so far, and you still, I guess you still. I mean, over lockdown, I don't think anybody was doing too much. You're quite limited. Have you started doing some bits and pieces again now?
Yeah, I've been doing. I'm working on. Well, there's actually 4 projects I'm working on at the moment, kind of interspersed.
Yeah.
I'm doing a couple of sample libraries as well.
Mm.
One's all based on 80s sounds like the Jam and Lewis, Janet Jackson stuff, which is very in vogue right now. And the other is all based on Ringo sounds.
Oh, right. Interesting.
All kind of, bottom head off, tea towel kind of vibe. And because I'd done one in about 2000, I think, called Brutal Beats,
Okay.
which was all kind of the Bonham stuff, which is actually how I ended up playing with Jimmy Page.
Right.
And because we re-recorded the Whole Lot of Love for the Beijing Olympics.
Right. Okay.
Closing ceremony with Leona Lewis. And, on that session, I mean, it's like Jimmy could have had anybody at all in the entire world would have leapt over hopes to do that. And he calls me, and I'm like, wow, my God. I'm kind of like, he says, hi, it's Jimmy Page. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Are you kidding me? It was, what was so magical about that was the fact that he wanted it set up exactly the way they had done the original.
Yeah.
So there I am on this riser in Olympic Studios, and there's no way I'm going to be John Bonham. I've got to put his spirit.
Yeah.
But I got to be me, otherwise it's going to come out really stupid, And I'll never forget the Jimmy was right between my rack tom and the ride cymbal, where the ride cymbal's flat. And he just starts, and I was like, oh my God. And then it got to that, the big fill in the middle. Boom, boom. And the low end on that was just like, I was kind of like, okay, we can stop now. I'll just quit. And this is Nirvana. I'm never going to get better than this.
Did you go for the big sizes as well, the Bonham sizes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had a 26, 14, 16, and 18.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. But I mean, there's been, even there's been so many different ways of doing things over the years that I've been lucky enough to experience. You go from that to one of the kind of early sampling scenarios. And there was a song called, I think it was called Give Me a Little More Time, I think, by Gabrielle, the girl with the iPad, which was the most played song on British radio that year. And what we did for that was we recorded the drum track, then we mastered it, put it on vinyl, scratched up a bit, and put it back onto tape.
Right.
To get kind of old style kind of sound going, Nowadays you've got plugins for all of that kind of stuff, But that was great from the being creative. How can we create this? Okay, we'll do that, and we'll put it back in there. And then you go to something as raw as the sessions with Jimmy or the sessions with Tina Turner, which was completely that kind of American sort of laid back kind of groove thing, And it's interesting with them because I did work a lot with Rod Stewart for a while. I was doing a lot of tracks with him, and there was one track we did, and they sent it over to LA, and Carmine Rojas was his MD at the time, the bass player I'd worked with, and he later told me, when we got that song, we were convinced it was Mickey Curry that was playing drums from Bryan Adams' band. He said, because it just didn't sound British at all. It sounded that kind of slight laid back sort of arrogance to it sort of thing, And I took that as a great compliment that I'd managed to sort of instill that sensation onto the track, and to be compared to Mickey Curry. He's a brilliant player. I love him. Again, I think he doesn't get as much coverage as he probably should get.
No.
But I was always fascinated by how he seemed to have the snare drum sort of up around his here somewhere when he sits behind the drum set. I don't know if you've ever seen him, but
it's an uncomfortable look, isn't it?
Oh, I know, isn't it? It's just got, how the hell do you manage to play like that?
Oh.
But all these wonderful, crazy ways of inventing things and making things happen, and the different sounds and styles and everything. It's, I mean, wow, how lucky can a guy be?
Charmed life, eh?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I don't ever forget it. Don't worry.
You know what? That's nice, and you've done it all with a smile on your face as well, which is.
How couldn't you? It's an impossibility.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, this hour the hour feels like 10 minutes. What a great story you're telling, and I really appreciate you doing it. Before we go,
yeah,
and I ask a lot of people this, and I tend to get the same kind of comments, but somebody who's just in college now, we've spoken about college before. What little gems of advice have you got for somebody wanting to go down the same route as yourself with the live session stuff, whatever,
I would say, first and foremost, learn how to play really well with a click track. Learn how the essence of being ahead, on top, behind. Learn how to enjoy simplicity. That is absolutely critical. 9 times out of 10, you're going to go into a session and you will have, if you're lucky, 2 toms, maybe 3. And everything will happen around hi-hat, snare drum, and bass drum. If you're happy to sit on a pocket, that's great. Learn the other stuff by all means, but don't think to go to a session and do all of that is what's going to make it work for you. You have to learn how to play simply and with the song, with the lyric, with the way a melody works. You can't, for example, going into a chorus, you can't play across a melody. You can't do something, that's going to mess with that. Yeah. So I would say that, and just be a cool, honest, decent, straightforward person, trying your best, trying your hardest, and you can do it. If you really want it, you can get there. I promise you.
Sounds like good advice.
Do it.
Sounds like good advice. Look, Geoff, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll get to see you sometime very soon. So thanks very much. Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.